Shalom, I'm Angel. Welcome to Healthy in Heart. Today I want to talk to you about sweeteners and gut health and what your CGM can't tell you. So you checked your continuous glucose monitor after you had the diet soda and the line stayed flat. There was no spike, no climb, just a quiet, reassuring plateau. And a small voice in your head said, "See, it's fine." But flat is not the same as safe, and your gut has been keeping a different kind of record. For years, the promise of non-nutritive sweeteners rested on one simple idea. If it does not raise your blood sugar in the next hour, it must not be doing much of anything at all. That idea made sense on the surface. It also happened to be the wrong question. The right question was never just, what does this do to my glucose right now? It was also, what does this do to the trillions of organisms living in my gut, and what do they do to me over the days that follow? That question sat mostly unasked for decades. Then researchers finally looked, and what they found reshapes how sweeteners and gut health should be understood, not as one category of interchangeable substitutes, but as 5 or 6 very different substances, each with its own relationship to the microbial world inside you. In 2022, researchers led by Jotham Suez ran a randomized controlled trial that did something almost nobody had done before. They gave 120 healthy adults, none of whom had ever regularly used non-nutritive sweeteners, daily doses of saccharin, sucralose, aspartame, or stevia for 2 weeks at levels below the acceptable daily intake. Other groups received glucose or nothing at all. Those were the control group. Then they measured what happened, not just to blood sugar, but to the stool and oral microbiome of every single participant. So all 4 sweeteners altered the microbiome, but they did not alter it in the same way, and they did not all affect glycemic control. Only saccharin and sucralose significantly impaired glucose tolerance. Basically, that means it made you more insulin resistant. Aspartame and stevia did not. And when researchers took stool samples from the human participants and used them to colonize germ-free mice, the mice developed the same glycemic patterns as their human donors. Now, that is not a small detail. That is the difference between a correlation and a cause. The microbiome was not just along for the ride, it was doing the driving. One more thread runs through this research, and it may be the most important one for how you think about your own body. Baseline gut bacteria, the ones already present for anyone, took the single dose of sweetener, predicted who would become a glycemic responder and who would not. The same sweetener in 2 different people produced 2 different outcomes because 2 different guts received it. Basically, no 2 guts are alike. So sucralose, let's have a closer look at that one. Sucralose is minimally metabolized by the human body. That sounds like it's a safety feature, but in practice, it means the compound reaches your gut largely intact, where it comes into direct, sustained contact with the bacteria that lives there. What happened next depends on the study, but the pattern leans in one direction. Saccharin consumption has shown inhibitory effects on beneficial bacteria such as lactobacillus and Akkermansia muciniphila. Those are species that are tied directly to metabolic health and a well-regulated gut lining. In a 10-week human trial, sucralose intake produced a 3-fold increase in Blatia coccides, alongside a reduction in Lactobacillus acidophilus, 2 species with documented roles in insulin resistance and how the body handles fat. That same study found sucralose consumption increased both serum insulin and the area under the glucose curve compared to water, meaning the body had to work harder to manage the same sugar load. Sucralose and saccharin are the 2 most consistently linked across separate research groups to reduced microbial diversity. The consequence is not abstract. A less diverse, disrupted gut community produces fewer of the short-chain fatty acids your intestinal lining depends on for integrity and calm inflammation. Over time, that can mean a gut that is more prone to permeability, more prone to low-grade inflammatory signaling, and a metabolic system working from a weaker foundation. Now let's look at saccharin. Saccharin's story runs almost parallel to sucralose's, and the 2 are frequently named together as the pair most reliably tied to impaired glycemic response. Altered gut bacteria bacterial genera, including Ruminococcus, Allulose, Duria, and Roseburia, have been associated with saccharin-induced liver inflammation in animal models. In humans, saccharin has been tied to gut microbial imbalances that are linked to metabolic dysfunction. So what makes saccharin worth naming on its own rather than folding directly into sucralose's story is how directly its effect on glucose tolerance traces back to the microbiome itself rather than any action on the pancreas or the liver. The sweetener does not touch blood sugar through the pathways that sugar does. It touches it by changing who lives in your gut and what they produce once they are there. Now let's look at aspartame. Aspartame is a sweetener most often described as having a comparatively limited impact on bacterial richness. It is rapidly metabolized in the small intestine, which theoretically reduces its direct contact with the bacterial communities further down the digestive tract. In the Suez trial, aspartame altered the microbiome and the metabolome. The metabolome is the interaction between one's genes and the environment, as every sweetener tested did, but it did not significantly impair glucose tolerance the way sucralose and saccharin did. Now, that does not make aspartame free of consequence. In animal research, a maternal high-fat diet combined with aspartame produced measurable shifts in the gut bacteria of newborn offspring, including lower levels of Enterococcus and Paracetterella, alongside higher levels of Clostridium cluster 4. The story with the aspartame is less about a dramatic disruption and more about a quieter, still developing body of evidence that has not been settled yet. So now let's look at stevia, which is gentler, but it's not inert. Stevia carries a reputation of being the safe, natural option, and in the glycemic response measured by Suez and its colleagues, it earned that reputation. Stevia did not significantly impair glucose tolerance in that trial, but gentler is not the same as harmless. Stevia consumption has been shown to perturb the gut microbiota, including reductions in diversity and alterations in Lactospiraceae and Ruminococcaceae, two bacterial families tied to gut barrier health. Separately, stevia glycosides, the specific sweet compounds extracted from the plant, have been shown to inhibit the growth of Lactobacillus reuteri strains in a concentration-dependent way. Lactobacillus reuteri is a beneficial species that helps maintain gut health through the production of lactic and acetic acid. When alongside a high-fat diet, stevia has produced alterations in the gut microbiota similar to those caused by saccharin. So the honest summary is stevia's blood sugar profile looks better than sucralose's or saccharin's, but its microbiome profile is not spotless. Now let's look at erythritol and allulose. Those are two different kinds of exception. Erythritol behaves differently from the four sweeteners above because it is largely absorbed in the small intestine before it ever reaches the colon, which limits its direct interaction with gut bacteria. Its concern lies elsewhere entirely in the bloodstream and the cardiovascular system rather than the microbiome, a story that is significant enough that it deserves its own telling, so I will give a full telling on it at a later date. Allulose stands apart in the opposite direction. Rather than disrupting microbial balance or sitting neutral, oral allulose triggers the release of GLP-1, a gut hormone that signals the pancreas, slows digestion, and helps regulate blood sugar, the same broad hormone category that GLP-1 medications work through. It carries roughly 70% of the sweetness of sugar, so a recipe typically calls for about 1 1/3 cups of allulose compared to 1 cup of sugar. Its evidence base in humans is still young and thinner than the microbiome research on the other two sweeteners, and that honesty matters even when the angle is a promising one. Healing is a journey. None of this is about fear. It is about seeing clearly. You were never meant to outsource the question of what belongs in your body to a label that says 0 calories. Your gut was designed with wisdom, populated by trillions of small, faithful workers who respond to everything you feed them, for better or worse. When you learn what a substance actually does inside you, rather than what its marketing promises, you are not being anxious. You are being a good steward of the temple you were given. You do not have to overhaul everything today. You just need to take your next faithful step. And now you know a little more about what that step is walking toward. So I hope this has been helpful. And if you want more details, head on over to healthyandheart.com. And until next time, remember to stay healthy and heart.